Hello everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. So now that it's been a few days since Shenhe officially released, I thought it would be a good time to go back over everything I've learned about her kit in order to maximize her supportive capabilities and damage. We'll briefly go over her kit and what you should be prioritizing in terms of main stats, substats, artifacts, weapons, talent priorities, and teammates. We'll even talk a little bit about rotations in order to make sure that you're squeezing out as much damage as possible. Shenhe has actually gotten a pretty bad rap for being too niche to be worth pulling for, but I'm here to tell you that if you are a cryo enthusiast, then Shenhe is definitely worth your time. We're going to be going into way more detail than my initial review of Shenhe, so hopefully this will be the only guide that you need. If you do end up finding the video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. It really does help me boost into the YouTube algorithm, and I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. Okay, but with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Just so that we're all on the same page, we're going to quickly go over Shenhe's kit again, but this time with a little more knowledge now that we've been playing her for a few days. Starting with her normal and auto attacks, honestly, unless you are running Shenhe specifically with Chongyun who can convert her attacks into cryo, you should probably not be building Shenhe's auto attacks at all. This is because she doesn't have a way to convert her attacks into cryo on her own, and on top of this, her multipliers are actually very low. Even Rosaria, who's a 4-star, has higher damage multipliers on her auto attacks, so if you don't have Chongyun on your team, it's just not worth the resources to level up. However, if you do have Chongyun, it's totally fine to build this up a little bit so that you can maximize your damage from your Icy Quills. And speaking of Icy Quills, this is definitely the main thing that you want to be focusing on. When Shenhe does use her elemental skill, she simultaneously gives every member in your party Icy Quill stacks. If one of your party members does inflict cryo damage to an enemy, then their damage will be boosted by a percentage of Shenhe's attack. If you use her press skill, then you'll get 5 stacks, and if you use her hold skill, then you'll get 7 stacks. Additionally, upon unlocking her passive, when using the press variant, you will increase your teammate's skill and burst damage by 15%, and alternatively, if you do use the hold variant, then you will increase their normal, charge, and plunging damage by 15%. In order to maximize the amount of damage that Shenhe can give your teammates, you essentially want to be using your skill as much as possible, and using all of the Icy Quill stacks that any of your teammates can proc. Keep in mind that each and every character on your team gets these stacks, meaning that if you have 3 cryo damage dealers on your team, and you use Shenhe's press skill, then you're actually going to have 15 Icy Quill stacks. And any Icy Quills not used during Shenhe's skill duration are essentially going to be wasted, meaning it's typically best to be constantly swapping between all of your teammates, so that you can use up all of your Icy Quills, and then refresh your entire team's Icy Quill stacks when Shenhe's skill comes off cooldown. Also, at low Constellations, I realized that it's actually best just to use her press skill. It might be very tempting to use her hold skill in order to increase your normal charge and plunging damage, but typically in battle, it's actually not worth the extra 1 energy, or the fact that your cooldown will be much longer, meaning that you should only really be using this if your enemy's in kill range, and you think you can take them out with auto and charge attacks. Otherwise, you might end up ruining your rotations and actually not getting as much energy overall. However, this does of course change when you do get her Constellation 1, because it allows you to use your skill a second time. Now, it's also very important to realize that this doesn't allow you to stack your skill, meaning that you can't use Shenhe's skill twice and then get 10 to 14 stacks, but instead it means that if you do use your skill a second time, then it'll refresh them back up to 5 or 7 stacks. Instead of looking at C1 like it's a huge damage boost, you should probably be looking at it instead like a huge utility boost, making it much easier to funnel back energy back into Shenhe, and making it much easier to have 100% uptime on your Icy Quill stacks. You just have to make sure that you're bringing Shenhe back onto the field in order to refresh them. And moving on, let's talk about her burst real quick. It is really important to increase her burst talent level, but not for the reason that you might think. While her burst is a lower priority than her skill, you still want to level it up not for the damage increase from her burst itself, but rather the increased damage that enemies are going to be taking from your cryo and physical resistance shred. This resistance shred can go all the way up to 15% at talent level 10, so once you're satisfied with leveling up her skill, make sure to move on to her burst. On top of this, when you do unlock her first passive, all teammates within her burst are going to get an additional 15% cryo bonus damage, meaning that if you pair up her burst with her skill, then you'll be getting 15% cryo bonus damage, up to 15% cryo and physical resistance shred, 5 to 7 Icy Quill stacks, and a 15% damage boost to either your normal charge and plunging damage, or 15% to your skill and burst damage. Hopefully by listing out all of these buffs individually will show you just how much Shenhe is actually adding to your team's damage. However, that being said, the amount of value that Shenhe is going to bring to your team is directly related to how much you invest into her, the teammates that you build around her, and your rotations in order to make sure that you constantly have all of your buffs up. Like I said, we will be going over her teams and rotations a little bit later, but let's first go over her build. For a support Shenhe build, you definitely need to be focusing on two stats in particular. First and foremost is attack, since that's what her skill directly scales off of, and secondly, and just as important in my personal opinion, is her energy recharge. Shenhe has an 80 cost burst, meaning that it's really hard to make sure that you have her burst up at all times unless you properly invest into your energy recharge stats, meaning that your stat priorities should be attack first, then energy recharge, then crit rate and crit damage. But before we get too far into artifact substats, let's quickly look at your weapon choices, because based on what weapons that you have available, it can definitely affect what you end up choosing for your artifacts. Very obviously, her main and best weapon is going to be the Calamity Queller. This weapon was specifically designed for a support Shenhe, because it has an insanely high base attack at level 90, an attack percent substat, and even more attack percent stacking after you use your elemental skill. This effect even doubles when Shenhe is off the field. Her very next best weapon is going to be Engulfing Lightning, not only because it also has a pretty high base attack, but because it gives you extremely valuable energy recharge, and even increases your attack based off of how much ER you have. It also increases your overall energy recharge after you use your burst, so this weapon actually comes very close in terms of value, even though it doesn't have as high of an attack potential. In this same vein, Skyward Spine is a decent option for her, since it does provide a decent amount of energy recharge and a high base attack, but it won't perform quite as well as the Engulfing Lightning or Calamity Queller. The Primordial Jadewing Spear as well as Staff of Homa are both decent options for Shenhe, again mainly due to their high base attack. However, unlike the other weapons that I mentioned earlier, crit rate and crit damage isn't nearly as important on Shenhe, unless you're going for a main DPS build. On top of this, their passives don't actually have that good synergy with Shenhe when she's a support, since the Primordial Jadewing Spear needs you to build up stacks while on field, and the Staff of Homa requires you to be under 50% health. But even with these slight drawbacks, both of these weapons are better than most of your 4-star options. The Vortex Vanquisher is also a decent option since it does have a high base attack and an attack substat. My only problem with the Vortex Vanquisher is that, like the Primordial Jadewing Spear, you do have to hit enemies multiple times in order to build up attack stacks, and additionally, to get the full effect, you do have to be shielded. This is perfectly fine if you're running her with a character like Diona or Zhongli, but if not, it's going to be very hard to get the full potential out of this weapon. But even with that being the case, it's still a decent option on her. So essentially, if you do have a 5-star weapon and can spare it, then definitely slap it on Shenhe. As for 4-star options, if you have the Lithic Spear and you're planning on running her with other Liyue characters, then the Lithic Spear can actually start competing with 5-star weapons. This is because it has a decent base attack, an attack percent substat, and depending on how many Liyue characters you have in your party, you get additional attack percent and crit rate. The Wavebreaker's Fin is also a very good option since it does have a very high base attack as far as 4-stars go, additional attack percent, and if you pair her with other high energy cost teammates, then you'll see a decent boost to her overall burst damage. However, if you do not get lucky with your energy recharge substats, then you should definitely consider the Favonius Lance. It has a decent base attack, but more importantly, it gives you good energy recharge and a chance for additional energy particles anytime you crit. This makes it much easier to funnel energy back into Shenhe's burst, and therefore makes it more valuable than the other 4-stars that I mentioned if you don't already have good energy recharge on your Shenhe. However, since all of these options are gacha weapons, if you're completely free to play and don't have any of the options that I previously mentioned, then your next best bet is going to be the Catch, since it also has an energy recharge substat, as well as boosting your burst crit rate and damage. However, I know a lot of people also run this weapon on the Raiden Shogun or Xiangling, so if you can't spare it for Shenhe, then your next best bet is going to be the Prototype Star Glitter, mainly just to make sure that you have enough energy recharge. It isn't nearly as strong as the other options, but if that's all that you have, then this is probably your best option. There is also the Royal Spear, which you could technically use on her if you wanted to. It does have a decent base attack, an attack substat, and can even help balance out your crit rate, but unfortunately you would have to use Masterless Star Glitter, and since this weapon isn't really the best in slot for any other characters in the game currently, it might just be better to save your Masterless Star Glitter for extra summons, or a Blackcliff weapon that more characters can actually use down the line. But ultimately, the decision is up to you. Okay, and the reason why I wanted to talk about weapons before artifacts is because they're greatly going to influence what you decide to choose. In terms of artifact sets that you can run on Shenhe, the most agreed upon option is going to be a 2-piece Shimenawa 2-piece Gladiator set. That way you can get an additional 36% attack. As for your main stats on your Sand, Circlet, and Goblet, you're going to want attack percent if possible. For From there, you're going to want extra attack percent on your flower and your feather, as much energy recharge as possible on all of your substats, and then last but not least, flat attack if it's there, and crit rate and crit damage. If you aren't able to get good energy recharge substats, then I actually highly recommend taking off your attack sands and replacing it with an energy recharge sands. Yes, your Icy Quill buff will suffer a little bit, but as I keep trying to write home, it's much more important to have all of your buffs up at once, as consistently as possible, than to only focus on maximizing your Icy Quill damage. However, if you are struggling with energy recharge and you're running an attack weapon anyway, you can go with either a 2-piece Shimenawa or Gladiator set and pair it with an Emblem of Severed Fate 2 set in order to get an additional 20% energy recharge. However, if you do decide to go with this build, then I definitely recommend going for attack on your Sand, Circlet, and Goblet. However, if you're going for a more damage-oriented build, then your best option for a main DPS Shenhe is going to be a full 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set. This is because it gives you extra cryo bonus damage, while also giving you up to 40% crit rate if your enemy is frozen. And while you could go for attack, it's probably better to go for an attack Sands, a crit rate or crit damage Circlet, and a cryo bonus damage Goblet. This is basically your standard for any DPS build in Genshin Impact, and while you will be giving up some of her supportive capabilities, if you want to run her as your main with Chongyun as your sub DPS, then this is probably your best bet. One more option that I do see floating around is the full 4-piece Noblesse set. In my opinion, this set is decent but not the best on her, especially when you can just give it to another member on the team. But if you already have a decent 4-piece set and you don't feel like farming, then this is a decent option. Okay, but with weapons and artifacts aside, let's quickly go over her constellations and decide whether or not they're worth it. We discussed Constellation 1 a little bit earlier in the video, so to reiterate, Constellation 1 is more utility than an attack boost, allowing you to keep up your burst a lot more consistently, and by providing you more energy overall. Just try to remember that the Icy Quills do not stack, so all of its value comes from better rotations. Constellation 2 does increase your burst duration by 6 seconds, which is absolutely massive, especially since this now means that you'll only have 2 seconds of cooldown between using your burst. Well, that is as long as you have good enough energy recharge. On top of this, it also gives you an additional 15% cryo crit damage, and while it might not be as big as the 40% that you can get from Goro, or the 60% that you can get from Kujosara, it's still really nice to have. C3 increases your elemental skill talent by 3 levels, which is actually decently valuable considering that it does boost up your Icy Quill damage even further. C4 sounds complicated, but essentially it allows Shenhe to do more damage with her elemental skill, depending on how many stacks of Icy Quill are consumed. Unfortunately, this damage increase does cap out well before 50 stacks if you don't also have C6. C5 is Shenhe's absolute worst constellation because it increases your burst by 3 talent levels. However, the cryo and physical resistance shred that you get from her burst caps out at 15% at talent level 10, meaning that you'll only see an increase to her burst damage, but won't see any increased damage for your teammates. And lastly, there is C6, which is absolutely game-changing because it essentially gives you unlimited Icy Quill stacks because normal and charge attacks will no longer consume Icy Quills. This makes characters like Ganyu and Ayaka absolutely busted, especially if you have C6 Ayaka, since this makes her already boosted charge attacks even more deadly. However, even though these constellations are pretty impressive, I would still probably say hold off on her constellations if you're still saving for characters in the future. Remember that Shenhe is completely cryo-specific, so unless you're a whale and you really want the strongest possible support for Ayaka or Ganyu, then it's probably better overall to get a new character down the line, instead of using them on constellations for a very specific and niche character. However, if you are feeling a little bit spicy and want to spend a little bit on Shenhe, then C1 or C2 is probably a good place to stop. Okay, and moving on, let's talk about her team synergies. Just like characters like Goro or Sara, who specialize within their own element, Shenhe is very niche in the way that she only really wants to be paired with other units that can deal cryo damage. This means that at the very least you need at least one other cryo member on your team, if not 2 or 3 in order to run a fully cryo team. This way you can fully take advantage of all of your Icy Quill stacks, while at the same time continuously feeding into your energy needs. The only real exceptions to this rule are going to be Anemo characters and Hydro characters. Anemo characters because they can reduce resistance to cryo through the Viridescent set, but also because they're actually able to deal cryo damage with infused swirls, meaning that while on a cryo team, they actually count as a cryo damage dealer, and therefore they can also take advantage of Shenhe's Icy Quills. And Hydro characters are also the exception because they're able to apply Hydro, which in turn allows you to freeze your enemies. This helps by providing much needed crowd control and allows you to burst down your enemy without fear of them moving. Also, if your main DPS cryo character is running a full 4-piece 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set, this means that they will be able to get the full 40% additional crit rate from the artifact passive. Okay, but what teammates actually pair best with Shenhe? For your cryo main DPS, your absolute top picks are going to be Ayaka and Ganyu. This is because Ayaka and Ganyu deal more cryo damage than any other character currently in the game, and therefore by boosting their damage, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. The next best character to pair up with Shenhe is going to be Chongyun, not only because he's a decent damage dealer, but because he can infuse his and his party members' attacks with cryo, making it much easier to top off on your Icy Quill stacks. On top of this, when you do use his elemental skill, it does reduce your entire party's elemental skill and burst cooldowns, making it much easier to rotate through your team. Kaya and Rosaria are also decent options in terms of damage dealers, but from my personal experience, they're much better as sub DPS units and energy batteries. And last but not least, we have Diona, who actually is an excellent character to pair up with Shenhe. Not only does she provide valuable shields and heals, but she's also one of the best cryo energy batteries in the game, and Shenhe actually makes Diona's damage actually not laughable. I didn't expect these two characters to pair so well together, but they definitely do. Shenhe boosting Diona's power, and Diona providing protection and energy for Shenhe. As for Anemo supports, it's pretty standard. Your absolute top pick is going to be Kazuha, not only for the cryo shred, but also because of the elemental bonus damage that you get through his elemental mastery buffs. Shenhe and Kazuha are an absolutely deadly combination because they both simultaneously boost each other. If you happen to have both of these characters and you're not using Kazuha on another team, then I actually highly recommend pairing these two characters together because they're going to allow you to reach your absolute highest damage in terms of a cryo mono comp. However, if you don't have Kazuha, both Venti and Sucrose are decent options, mainly for their shredding abilities as well as their crowd control. Jean and Sayu are also decent options, especially if you need a healer, but in most situations you're probably going to want to use one of the units previously mentioned, not because either of these units are bad, but instead because you have Diona as an option for a healer as well as Hydro options. And speaking of Hydro options, your absolute best bets are going to be Kokomi, Xingqiu, and Mona. All three of these units can provide off-field Hydro application, allowing you to freeze your enemies, allowing you to get the most damage possible out of your cryo main DPS. I personally enjoy using Kokomi the most since she does work as a Hydro applicator and a healer at the same time, and while you can technically do the same thing with both Mona and Xingqiu depending on how you build them, Kokomi is probably just the simplest to use. However, despite this being the case, Xingqiu or Mona is definitely going to get you more damage overall, so if you run a Xingqiu with decent HP for healing, or run Mona with a prototype Amber in order to get a little additional healing here and there, then you can probably get away with running them so that you don't have to run a healer, allowing you to maximize on your overall damage output. I also want to briefly mention that you can technically run Shenhe on a reverse melt comp. It isn't always easy to pull this off, but if you were to use some characters in order to apply Pyro, it would be Bennett, Xiangling, and possibly even Klee. Or if you decide to use Shenhe as a physical support, you could run her as a support for Eula or Razor, and then pair her up with characters like Fischl, Beidou, or Raiden Shogun in order to trigger Superconduct. However, that being said, I have been seeing a lot of Eula comps that actually completely take out Electro characters in favor of having Shenhe, Diona, and Rosaria, and this team seems to be doing fairly well. Okay, and last but not least, let's actually get into gameplay tips. Using Shenhe to the fullest is all about managing your rotations. You essentially want to cast your elemental skill and burst as closely as possible so that your active teammates can take full advantage of all the buffs available. Make sure that you're fully cycling through all of your characters that can deal cryo damage, otherwise you're essentially wasting valuable Icy Quills. Pro tip, if you are using a character with a long burst animation, make sure you use their burst as soon as possible so that you can use all of their Icy Quills, cycle through a few more characters, and then switch back to Shenhe when her skill cooldown is reset, and then cast Shenhe's skill again so that she can apply Icy Quill stacks back onto that initial burst. If you time everything perfectly with Shenhe's press skill, then you should be able to get a full 10 stacks of Icy Quill damage onto a burst like Ayaka's burst or Ganyu's burst. This essentially doubles your damage and should be worked into your rotations as much as humanly possible. Another pro tip is if you are running a freeze comp, try to make sure that you freeze your enemy in the center of Shenhe's burst. This way all of your follow-up cryo attacks will be in the center of her burst, and therefore you'll be getting the full effects of her entire kit. If you find yourself having a hard time building up Shenhe's burst again due to its high energy cost, boss, make sure to have at least one other support teammate equipped with either one of the sacrificial weapons or the Favonius weapons, so that anytime you generate new particles you can switch to Shenhe in order to get her burst back up. And lastly, if you're running an Anemo character in the party with Shenhe, make sure that you use both Shenhe's skill and burst as well as your Anemo skills and burst before using your Cryo main DPS. This way you can maximize your Cryo main DPS's damage by stacking as many buffs and resist shreds as possible. And I think that's about all that I have to say about Shenhe for now. Obviously, since she just came out, there's still more testing to be done, and more optimal tweaks can be made down the line, but for now I think that Shenhe is a surprisingly good character, and even though she may not be as versatile as other characters, on Cryo teams specifically, she's definitely performing well, allowing Cryo DPSs to reach damage that they've never been able to reach in the past, and cementing her as the go-to Cryo support character. If you did end up finding the video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it does help me boost into the YouTube algorithm. Let me know what you currently think about Shenhe, and whether or not you plan to summon for her and build her. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact videos from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. We just recently hit 20,000 subscribers, and I just want to quickly say thank you guys so much. I can't believe that we finally hit this milestone. And if you want to help me reach other goals like reaching 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, then I'd greatly appreciate your support. But that's all for now, so until next time, best wishes. Bye!